there.
Go. Okay. So we're going to talk about St. Anselm's ontological argument in a book that he wrote called the Proslogium. It's a very rational argument for the existence of God, which is unlike Aquinas' arguments for the existence of God, which were all empirical, started with data that you could see, hear, feel, and taste and touch, and did a causal argument because every object in the world has to be caused. That's Aquinas' kind of argument. St. Anselm has a very different rationalist argument, and he kind of softens you up by saying you have an artist. Okay, you have a person here who is an artist, and they're going to paint a picture, and they have in their head the idea of the picture that they're going to paint, okay, whatever it is. And then they come over here and they actually paint the picture, okay, on the easel, and that transfers from the head, the idea in the head, into the real world, which is on the canvas, okay, and what St. Anselm wants to do is transfer the idea of God into the real world. Now, he doesn't just say, you have the idea of God in your head, therefore it's real, okay? Because that would mean that we, as human beings, are creating God in our head. What he does is offer a very rational argument. Now, there's still a person, okay, who has the idea of God in their head. And he defines very carefully this idea of God. In fact, what St. Anselm does is have a conversation with an atheist. He says, Mr. Atheist, do you think that there is no God in reality? And the atheist, of course, would say, that's right, that's what I think. And so Anselm would say, well, do you understand the idea of God? And the atheist would say, well, yes, I understand. And he would say, okay, is God that thing than which nothing greater can be conceived? And the atheist, I mean, in real life they may or may not agree, but in Anselm's book, so he has the atheist agree, yes, God means that than which nothing greater can be conceived. Okay, that's what it means. And he has that idea in his head. This is the atheist, okay, and he has the idea of that than which nothing greater can be conceived in his head. So Anselm then says, okay, thank you, Mr. Atheist. Do you think that God might exist in reality, and there are people like me who believe that God does exist in reality? Do you understand that? And the atheist says, well, yes, of course I understand that. You believe that there's a God out there in reality. I'm telling you, I don't think there is. That's an idea in your head. It doesn't exist in reality. And Anselm would say, right, got it. But you do understand, you do have in your head the idea of God existing both in your mind and in reality. And the atheist would say, yes. Well, at this point, it seems like it's just preliminaries, but Anselm's already won. Because he has put in the head of the atheist the idea of God in the head and in reality. And that idea is in the head of the atheist, which means he has conceived it. Now go back to the definition of God. That than which nothing greater can be conceived. So now he just asks the atheist, so is it greater to exist only in your head, on the one hand, or greater to exist in your head and in reality? Well, the atheist, of course, says, well, it would be greater to exist in your head and in reality. Oh. So you have an idea of God existing in your head and in reality in your head. And you have, in your head, the idea of God, which is that than which nothing greater can be conceived. So you've conceived of something greater in your own head, and you have an idea of that than which nothing greater can be conceived. So there is a contradiction in your head. And now the atheist says, oh, okay. So you have to understand exactly what this contradiction is. He's got the idea of God in his head and in reality. That's greater than the idea of God, with God defined as that than which nothing greater can be conceived. Okay? So, Anselm is now in charge, and he says, since we have derived a contradiction from what we started with is false. What did we start with? we started with your idea that God exists only in your head and not in reality. So that's false. It's false that God exists only in your head and not in reality. If that's false, then God exists in reality. Now, the atheist might say, well, what's wrong with believing a contradiction? Well, there's a lot wrong with believing a contradiction. If you believe a contradiction, like A and not A, whatever A is the sun is shining, and not A is it's not the case that the sun is shining. They can't both be true. If you believe that, then it follows logic. Anything you want follows logically from that. Because all you have to do, this is an and, so both sides of it are true. So you just say, well, if this is true, so if you got a contradiction in your head, let's let that be true, okay? What's in your head is true, fine. If that's true, then this is true. A is true, either side of it is true. So, and if that's true, let's make up something, like the world is going to end tomorrow, and that's E out here, okay? Well, if A is true, then A or E is true, right? Okay? The sun is shining, or the world's going to end tomorrow. Because or is not and, it works differently. All you need is one side to be true for it to be true. But once you've gotten here, you just go back up here. Both of these are true. You say, not A. Well, if one thing or another is true, and one side is false, the other side is true. So immediately you have derived that the world is going to end tomorrow, which has nothing to do with your premises, just because you started with a contradiction. So having a contradiction in your head is very bad. So the atheist at this point should, propose that he is a candidate for baptism tomorrow in Anselm's church or whatever. So that's the ontological argument.